Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Administration and Operations Committee for Tuesday, March the 15th. As far as attendance, we do have regrets from Councillor Ferrier. He's feeling a little under the weather. We hope he's feeling better. And Councillor Wheat, he's not here as yet, but we haven't heard that he's not coming. So we will leave it at that. Everybody else is in attendance. As far as the approval of the agenda, first of all, does anybody have anything to add to the agenda? Okay, seeing none, a couple things here. So we do have an addendum. A couple things with committee's indulgence that I would like to do here. We've got a couple of things that are all kind of related to staff report 9.4. First of all, we've got some delegations in the addendum. First thing I want to understand here, what's committee's thoughts on allowing the delegations to speak? Is there anybody opposed to allowing the delegations to speak? Okay, that's good. That being said, that's fine. They will have their chance to speak. So what I'm thinking here, committee, is the fact that once we have the delegations, we'll receive those as information and we will forward them on to the staff report 9.4, which talks of 2 Beverly Street. But there's also a committee report 8.1, and there's also a new communications in the addendum 10.1 that also are associated with that staff report of 9.4. So what I'm looking to do here, if committee would indulge, I'm looking to move 8.1 and 10.1 to 9.4 staff report along with the delegations. Does that sound okay to committee? Okay. All right. So that's good. That said, with the changes, Councillor Gatward, go ahead. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, I was in favor of what you just said, but I do have, sorry, I have one other item for the agenda. I have a question under other business, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
No problem. Okay, so with the addendum and moving those particular ones around and Councillor Gatward's addition to other business, can I get a mover for the agenda? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Coleman. Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Declaration of pecuniary interest. If you have any, let us know now, or if anything creeps up through the meeting, please just let us know at that point in time. So we've got 3 delegations this evening. 4.1, we've got County of Brant Pride Committee, the flag raising. I think we have a couple people here. Nathan is here to speak to that, I believe. So just a reminder to all the delegations, you will have 10 minutes for your delegation, and then there will be questions if there is any after that fact. So Nathan, go ahead, please. Thank you.
I'm going to turn it over to Tara first, actually. So go ahead, Tara.
Hi, my name's Tara. I'm one of the co-chairs of the Bridge Brant, and we had an idea come forward to the Bridge from a transgender community member that's been doing a lot of work. Actually, she put together the tree in the Brantford Public Library for Trans Day of Remembrance the last 2 years. It's quite an effort. It's been well over 300 leaves with people's names on it. And if you get a chance next year, I encourage you to check it out. But she had the idea to raise the transgender flag on Trans Day of Visibility, which is March 31st. So we brought that forward to Brantford, and then we connected with Brantford Pride as well. And then we connected with Nathan from the County Pride. So I'll just share one little statistic. It's my favorite statistic when I do safer spaces trainings. So there's about 47% of transgender youth actually try to harm themselves, which is a pretty startling number. It's almost 40% of transgender youth that actually try to end their life. But with parental support, and this is why I love sharing this statistic, if they have one supportive parent, that statistic drops 97%. It flips right around and they're actually lower than the national average for youth of their age. And the reason I really like this statistic is because it shows us that with support, people's lives can change dramatically. And if it can't be a parent, it can be maybe a service provider or a family friend or a community. And I think that's why visibility is so important and showing support for many of the marginalized groups in our community. So that's my little take on why showing our support so visibly and letting people know they're not alone is really important. So thank you for having us today.
Yeah, so I'll just echo a lot of what Tara said, in that the visibility matters within the community. And there are people within our tiny borders of, well, our large geographic borders of the County of Brant, but small population that identify this way. And so this is an important day to highlight their contributions and that they are still part of our community. And so to bring a visible symbol of awareness to them. So with that, I thank you for your time and thank you for your consideration on this item, and we'll take any questions that you have.
Thank you for that. Any questions from committee? Councillor Miller.
Just thank you, Mr. Chair. Just one. Can one of you presenters tell me what the acronym 2SLGBTQ plus stands for? I see it a lot, but that acronym keeps changing too over time. But what does it stand for?
So in that, sorry, Nathan, if you don't want. So the 2S is for two spirit. L is for lesbian, G is for gay, B is for bisexual, T is for transgender, Q is for queer, and then the plus is for the many identities that don't get captured in that. And it changes depending, so you can emphasize the population that you feel might need to be emphasized. So for example, 2S right now, two spirit is at the front, just to acknowledge that our Indigenous folks within our community have maybe been marginalized up to this point and really should be centered. Their voices should be centered.
Okay, so just to be clear, that acronym that I see, that's okay. So you may not see that elsewhere. It's just, is that correct? You can customize is what I'm saying. Is that's what it sounds like you're saying?
Yes,
is that
but
correct?
the letters all stand for the same things, but you can kind of change them around.
Okay,
if that makes sense.
That might explain why sometimes it changes on me. So okay, I appreciate the answer. Thank you.
I'll just add slightly that I use queer often as an umbrella term, and queer really means something atypical, I guess you can say. And so so often I use queer as a larger umbrella to cover all of those communities as well.
Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to our delegates. I read a report the other day that said that the number of people that consider themselves to be part of this community, and this was US data, had risen from 7%, I think, to 12%, maybe even 14% in the last decade. Do you have a sense of what percentage of our population of the County of Brant form part of this community?
No, I won't say that. I don't know that you could have very accurate necessarily statistics about that. People do identify and are fluid and sometimes in their identity. So I mean, it's very difficult, and someone that there's often different I guess representation. So someone may identify that they have to identify themselves as a member of that community, and so ascribing labels to people who they don't feel represent them is also kind of harmful. So I will just say that I know that there are a couple members within the County of Brant that I know of personally. So.
Okay, thank you.
I'll just add really quickly too. The bridge does a lot. So the bridge works in Brant and Brant County, and we do a lot of, or the County of Brant. Sorry, I always say it wrong. I apologize. So we do a lot of work with high school students, and I think the reason we're seeing that number grow is there are folks that identify as transgender, but there are also folks who identify as non-binary, and that number is really growing. And if someone identifies with non-binary, it could mean a couple things, but it really stands for the fact that they don't feel that they identify with either gender. So we're seeing those numbers grow, and those folks that are thinking of gender differently than maybe we do, or feel like they don't align with the masculine or feminine genders solely, but kind of between the two. And we are seeing that a lot with youth, not just youth, also with adults, but you have a large number of youth in the county school systems and in Grand Erie and abroad that are identifying this way. And I know how important it was for me. I remember coming back to my first flag raising in Brantford. I was lucky enough to be back I had moved away, and seeing high school students lined up. I mean, they were probably skipping school, which is questionable, but just the fact that they got to see themselves represented in their own community, it made me cry. Because when I had lived here, I felt like there was nothing here or no acknowledgement of my existence when I lived here. So I think it's really important for the youth. And I think you probably have a really high population of youth, and probably lots of people that you don't suspect either. About 30% of transgender folks, you would never know that they are, only 30% would you ever know that they are transgender. So 70% of those folks are just living amongst you, and we just have no idea.
Thank you.
Any other questions from committee? Okay, with that, thank you for your presentation. How does committee wish to deal with this? Councillor Bell?
Yeah, I think there is a proposed text for inclusion that we should perhaps offer as a motion that we bring forward from this council.
Is there a seconder to that? Councillor Howes? Any questions regarding that? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you for that. Okay, so we're going to move on to 4.2, which is one of the delegations on the addendum. We've got Nancy Karuba and Jenny Lynn Bisht. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. My apologies if I did not. So again, just a reminder, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and the floor is yours when you're ready.
Thank you. I think someone is going to help us with the slides. That was the arrangement ahead of time. So thank you to whoever that is. If you could put the slides up, please. My name is Nancy Karub. I'm a resident of St. George. I'm a professional project manager. I'm on the executive of the Garden Club, and recently am a member of the St. George Historical Super Test Committee that brings this proposal to you today. I'd like to just start by saying that when we prepared this proposal, we were unaware that in parallel, there was a 49-page report being developed by the county staff that has already concluded that 64% of the comments from the public consultation process supports option 1, which is the tear down of the building at 2 Beverly, and in order to add more.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Nancy, but we've got a lot of feedback. If you're not on mute and you're not speaking, please put your phones on mute. Thank you. Sorry about that, Nancy. Go ahead.
That's okay. And so the report concludes that 64% of the comments from the public consultation process support option 1, which is the tear down of the building to add more parking. I know that this was the county's original position. We have recently read the report. It's a really good report authored by Adam. And to be transparent, after reading it, I really wondered if there was any point in presenting our ideas tonight. Because I felt like you've already been supplied with a comprehensive report that recommends tearing down the building for more parking. It's represented as the least expensive option. It appears to be what people want. And so why take your time to listen to other proposals? And I'll tell you, there are 2 reasons why I decided to come anyway. The first is that the comments made by citizens in the public consultation process were made in response to the options that were provided. And those options centered around tearing down the building for more parking. In response to that context, the comments appear to be in favor of tearing down the building. The options provided did not offer a scenario where the public could have both more parking and the potential to restore the building in a way that's in keeping with the historic charm of the village. And that also can offer services to our community as it exists now, our future community that we know is represented in increased residential growth that's just around the corner, and also to tourism, to our visitors. We feel our proposal represents both the best of both options. And yes, the best of both options comes at a cost that would have to be well managed and well contained, but one that would add significant long-term value for many years beyond the immediate expense. The second reason I decided to come anyway is because the public consultation process defines itself in the report as calling out all concerns from the public regarding the option that is proposed. And it also calls for the public to provide further alternatives to what we feel would be desirable. And the committee does in fact have concerns with the demolition of the building that is deemed to be worthy of historical designation. Our proposal includes washrooms on that site. We believe washrooms located at the waterworks are a little like the overflow parking at the church. They are neither obvious nor are they easily accessible for tourists. And so in the 7 or 8 minutes remaining, I'd like to quickly go through the proposal with you. And I would request that despite of the compelling report that you received on Friday, I would request that you just keep an open mind, if you will, for the proposal. This is our committee, the St. George Historical Super Test Committee, not exactly a committee name that rolls off your tongue, but nevertheless, Jenny Lynn Bish heads it up. It was her vision. I'm on the committee as well, part of the Garden Club, Jane McDonald, John Paxuda, Gwen Hunter. Gwen Hunter used to work in that building, actually, and we have been supported well by Councillor John McAlpine. Next slide, please. The St. George Historical Super Test Committee proposes the former Super Test building at 2 Beverly be saved and repurposed. We propose that it be refurbished to be the office of the St. George Garden Club. If you don't know us, we're a community-based not-for-profit group that we've been in St. George for 101 years. 101 years. Last year was our anniversary of 100 years. The refurbished building may also serve as a tourist or visitor information center and will be a welcoming community landmark. This proposal also includes the addition of ample parking. And so the increased parking, as well as the tourist information center and the home of the Garden Club, is really what we're talking about. And the next slide, please. And so I'd like to talk a little bit about why we think it's appropriate that the building house the office of the St. George Garden Club. We've been around for 100 years, so we have some longevity and some credibility there. We offer, our membership has been around 100 people consistently for many years. We offer membership meetings, tutorials, guest speakers, plant sales, field trips, workshops. We have an engaging social media forum, a great website for engagement, and we offered all of this in every way we could throughout the pandemic, during a time when a sense of community and a sense of belonging was really important to everyone here. We not only offer services, but we beautify the community. We plant and maintain beautiful flowers on Main Street, our local arena, the post office, the village cenotaph. Plans are in place for further beautification of that as we work with the local brownies to make a pollinator garden. And our members will then have the opportunity to work with the youth in our village. We're envisioning here at this location, 2 Beverly, and a building that is clean and simple, fit for purpose and welcoming. And who better to beautify that than the Garden Club? Making this proposed site the physical home of the Garden Club would provide the community with greater access to our club and our services that we provide. as well as providing the club with the visibility it deserves in the center of the community and a physical space it requires. Now, one thing about the Garden Club that I want to call out just as a potential point of discussion, some of you may already know, Amy Bradley is currently the president of the Garden Club. Her 2-year term as president comes to an end in 8 months' time in November of this year. She's a family member of the CAO for the County of Brant. And because of that association, Amy chose not to be involved in the development of the proposal. She is aware of it, but she chose not to vote on it when we brought the vote to the St. George Garden Club executive. We know that the county conducts itself ethically and that no favoritism would be shown to this proposal. We're not asking for it, we don't expect it, but neither do we want the proposal to be penalized for the same reason. We really feel that this proposal stands on its own merit and we trust that the council will too. The next slide, please. Oh, sorry, we're on the right slide now. So our vision for this is obviously it is owned by the Brant County. We propose that it be operated by the St. George Garden Club and that this property serve the community in 2 ways. The first way, to promote community-driven, creative-based endeavors. And by that, I mean all of the types of activities I spoke of earlier, the workshops, the guest speakers, things like that, activities that go on with the St. George Garden Club. But it also be an information center for tourists and visitors, for local programs and attractions, and a place where local artisans can display their work. The second objective is to improve the guest experience for visitors to the village. And by that, I mean to provide additional parking. There is a pencil drawing that has been submitted that shows incremental parking, the number of incremental parking spots, even with keeping the building and still having some green space. Perhaps we can look at that if time permits at the end. So improving the guest experience by additional parking. This can include electrical charging stations for electrical cars, providing washrooms, which at that site we feel is a much better location than the Waterworks location, providing outdoor seating and bicycle racks as sort of a rest station for cyclists. There are lots of ideas. There's going to be lots of ideas about how this space can be used well. And I'm sure there's going to be great creative ideas coming forward. And when they do come forward for consideration, we really would like to have it filtered through those 2 objectives. Does it promote community-driven, creative-based endeavors? And does it improve the guest or visitor experience to St. George? And if the ideas align with those questions, if they can be managed well, and if they're fiscally responsible, then it will be considered for inclusion. And if they do not, then it may just not be the right fit. And so the last slide, please. Our ask to you today is that the proposal be accepted, that the county set up a working steering group for this project, a steering group for the St. George community, and that steering group be led by the St. George Garden Club, the community steering group. We propose that this refurbished building, which sits in the center of our village, be the physical office of the St. George Garden Club and a visitor information center for tourists. It will represent this village of St. George very well, and it will provide more for its visitors. More space to park, more access to information about community activities, washrooms to use, more access to the garden club services, a place for cyclists to rest, and improved overall visitor experience. The committee believes there is enough interest to further investigate this proposal as an option. And we request that together with the steering committee, we are provided time and resource to assess the renovation, the landscape, the ongoing management, the maintenance, and the value proposition to the community. And that we may come back to you with the proposed scope, budget, timeline, and plan that you can then decide upon. Thank you very much for considering this.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Nancy. Okay, so to committee questions, Councillor House.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, through you to Nancy. Nancy, thank you for the very well delivered presentation. It's great to hear your input. A big part of this proposal hinges around the St. George Garden Club, and I have to admit I don't know that much about the organization. So I wanted to ask you a couple of questions specific to the group. I'll list off 2 or 3 questions, and then hopefully you can educate me. Can you tell me if, like, does the group currently have an office somewhere, or where do you meet? Do you have a rented facility? And is that part of your proposal, that this would be a rented arrangement? My other question is, you mentioned about the group having a vote, and about how the president couldn't vote for obvious reasons. I'd like to learn a little bit more about that vote, kind of what you were voting on, and like, was everyone who did have the opportunity to vote, or were they unanimous in this direction? Is everybody of the same voice? And then lastly, the public engagement process that we decided to use for this question to the community was through our Engage Grant process, which is a process we've used for a number of different projects and questions for the communities. Do you have any confidence that the members of your garden club took the opportunity to share their opinions through the Engage Grant process before we heard from you tonight?
Yeah, okay, thank you for those questions, Councillor House. I'll start with the first one. We do not have a physical space. The Garden Club does not have a physical space. When we meet together with the community, we have used the fire hall, the community room in the fire hall. When we have workshops to show people how to do things and have creative endeavors, we have done that at the arena. We drive around and deliver things to people because we don't have a central place for our members to pick things up. And we move boxes of documents, totes of supplies that are used in our service offerings to the community, and office equipment like printers from house to house when there is a change in executive. There is no central place for the community to come to see the Garden Club in one physical location. And so that physical location is important to us. In terms of what we're proposing, that we rent space, all of that, the management of that and all of that that's entailed, there's a lot of moving parts there and a lot of things to consider, and we would come back with a proposal about that. It is not the only thing that's being considered at the moment. In terms of the vote, when Jenny Lynn engaged in the Engage Grant, and there were a number of comments and some support around saving the building, she started a committee. And that committee ran separately from the Garden Club. But because we were looking at this as the potential home of the Garden Club, we went to the executive. The executive, I think, had 11 members at the time. Amy decided not to vote. One other person did not vote. And all of the other people that voted were in favor of us proposing that the building be saved and be the physical home of the Garden Club. So an overwhelming support there. I understand that Councillor McAlpine has also spoke to the Business Association, who has provided us with a letter of support as well. In terms of the Engage Grant process, when we went to the St. George Garden Club executive, there were many people that were not aware of the forum on Engage Grant. And I don't know how many people then went into it and made a comment. We did not ask them to, we didn't direct them to, and so I don't know about that, but I know that there are some people that are mindful of that, keep an eye on it, and actively participate in it. I know that one of the committee members spoke to a business owner in St. George just the other day who had previously said that they wanted the building tore down. They see it as an eyesore. They wanted more parking. They feel that that would be beneficial for local businesses. And when the committee member told them what we had planned, they said, oh, well, that's a whole different story then. I feel really differently about it then. And so I think that there perhaps could be other people that feel the same way.
Is that good, Councillor House?
Yeah, that's very good. You answered all my questions. Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
We do have one more to add to that. I'm Jenny Lynn. As far as our membership goes, because of the speed at which we needed to get the proposal to council, our membership will be updated tonight. We went to the executive first to see if they were on board with this project, and they are. And then our membership will be updated, like I said, tonight, because we put this together very quickly because we had a very limited amount of time to get it to you guys.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. Any other questions from committee? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Nancy. Thank you, Nancy, for your presentation. I have two questions. Sorry, three questions. Is what you're proposing, in essence, option 2, but operated by the gardening club?
What is option 2? Can you tell me again, please?
It says retain the original building and remove the garage and expand the existing parking lot. Would that conform with what you're proposing?
Yeah, that's correct. And of course, with the addition that building be purposed for the home of the garden club, a visitor information center, and a rest station.
Yeah, thank you. Second question, you said county-owned garden club operated. Does that mean that the gardening club would cover all the operating costs of the facility?
That again has to be assessed, and we come back with that in a proposal and a plan.
Okay.
A number of different options there that we haven't had the time really to vet entirely.
Okay. And your proposal does include having community washrooms in the facility?
Yes, it does.
Okay, thank you very much, Nancy.
Well, to visitors, yes.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Any other questions from committee? Okay, seeing none. Thank you very much for that presentation, Nancy. We're going to move on to the second presentation, and then we will get a motion to move them both to 9.4 as I was discussing earlier. Okay, so thank you, Nancy. We're going to move on to 4.3, which is Kevin Hewitson.
Councillor Pierce, it's just a petition submitted.
Okay,
He's not.
so that's just okay. So that's just the petitions there. That's correct. Okay, all right. So that being said, there's no more delegations that I can see here. So what I'm looking for is a motion to take the delegation, to receive the delegation from Nancy, and to receive the petition from Kevin, and move that forward to 9.4. Councillor Miller. Seconder, please. Councillor Coleman. Any questions on that? Councillor McAlpine, you have a question? You're on mute, Councillor.
There was a letter from the Business Association that should be forwarded as well to the 9.4.
Yeah, that's under 10.1. That we'll get to that when we go there. Right now, it's just the delegations that I'm forwarding for that.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder for that. Any other questions? All those in favor? Opposed? Okay, that is carried. Okay, so that takes us out of delegations and presentations. We will move on to section number 5, which is adoption of the previous minutes. Can I get a mover, please? Mayor Bailey? Councillor Howes? Any questions on those previous minutes? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We will move on to section 6. Is there any business arising from those minutes? Seeing none, we will move on to section 7, which is consent items to be approved. We'll start with 7.1.1, which is RPT-22-74-2022 for the Municipal and School Board Election Compliance Audit Committee. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor, please? Counselor Coleman, seconder, Counselor McAlpine. Questions on this report? Alicia, I'm not sure if you want to, it's pretty straightforward. I don't know if there's anything you want to say about it or just take questions if need be.
Yes, thank you, Chairman Pierce. Through to the committee. Essentially, it's just a report indicating where we're at right now in the election process. Things are starting to move along, and so there are certain responsibilities under the Municipal Act that we have to request of council. So if anybody has any questions on any of those items, we'd be happy to answer them.
Thank you. Questions on the report? Councillor Miller, then Councillor Gatward.
I assume, through you, Mr. Chair, that the other municipalities would also have to agree.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Miller, yes. There is a working group established on a multitude of election issues with this group. All of the election staff from all of the municipalities listed have agreed, and it is my understanding that everybody either has received consent from their council to proceed or is doing so in conjunction with us. So by the time that we meet next, hopefully this should be an item which we will move forward on.
Okay, we're good with that. Councillor Gatward, go ahead, please. You're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Alicia. Thank you, Alicia. It's a good report. Lots of information. On page 3, you recommend 4 locations for the advanced voting, in-person voting. Are those the same 4 locations that we had in the previous election for advanced polls?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Councillor Gatward, I would have to defer that question to Heather Boyd. However, I can confirm that those 4 locations have been chosen specifically for their internet connectivity, as that will be the only date where we will have live in-poll voting in conjunction with online voting. And so we require solid internet connections for that purpose, but I will defer to Heather on what was done in 2018.
Heather, you want to add to that?
Sure. Through the chair, those are mostly all the same ones. The only difference from 2018 is that we're doing Cairnsville instead of Oakland, because obviously we don't have access to the Oakland building at this time.
Okay, because I thought there was an advanced poll at the airport.
Not in the last several elections.
No? Okay. And the reason we need the internet is because of the equipment?
It's order to have a live elections list, so that, because it's vote anywhere, so people can't go from one location and vote and then go to another location and vote and go to another location and vote. So the lists all have to link up with each other.
I get it. And yeah, I wasn't looking for one particularly for Oakland, because we have bad internet here. Most people know. I was thinking about Mount Pleasant, because there's a whole area that people will not, I don't know how far they'll be willing to travel, but at least they will have an online voting option this time. So perhaps that will help. Thank you very much for answering my question.
Okay. Any other questions from committee? Seeing none, I have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. We will move on to 7.1.2, which is RPT-22-77, which is a CIP application for 127 Grand River Street North. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Wheat, Councillor Howes. Any questions on this report? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.3, which is RPT-22-78. We've got a CIP application for 11 Grand River Street North. Can I get a mover, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Howes. Any questions on this one? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.4, which is RPT 22-84, which is for the fleet vehicle replacement. Recommendation from Mr. Demers. Can I get somebody to put it on the floor, please? Councillor Howes, Mayor Bailey. Questions on this report? Councillor Bell, then Councillor Gatward.
Yeah, not so much a question, but a comment and a thank you. I noticed that we're going to purchase 2 electrical vehicles, and I really do think that's the way to go. So I'm appreciative of staff taking this on. Thank you.
Well said. Thank you, Councillor. And Councillor Gatward.
Yes, I was going to echo the similar comment to staff for their proactive work on this and getting these quotes in and getting the equipment that we need ordered. I'm wondering, these are 2 dealerships that we haven't previously had used. And were there other dealerships asked for quotes besides the vendors listed? That was just, I was just curious about that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. General Manager Walton.
Through your Councillor Pierce to Councillor Gatward. We go through the process of advertising, so we aren't asking dealerships, everybody responds to the actual advertisement that's put out through the media and the website. And the bids and tenders, I believe.
Thank you.
Gatward, you're good with that?
Thank you, yes.
Any other questions? Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.5, which is RPT 22-85, which is the Paris BIA budget for 2022. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Bell, Councillor Wheat. Any questions on this? Councillor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Not questions, but a little bit of background. I think if you look at the budget, you'll see it's actually a deficit budget, apparently. But if you look at page 83 of our report, you will see that as of the end of October last year, there was a significant bank balance. And one of the requirements of the BIA is basically to not have a balance. They need to basically run an in and out budget. So one of the reasons that there is a deficit for this year is that we're able to eat into that budget, and it will probably take a couple of years to use up that balance that is there at the end of October. The budget also provides for a coordinator, a staff position, to help organize the BIA. Over the last few years, it's become quite apparent that it is quite demanding to manage the BIA and administer the BIA. None of the current retailers and owners of businesses in the downtown have that time available. So it was concluded that in order to make the BIA effective, allow it to focus on its primary cause of trying to improve the business of downtown, it would be better to have a part-time administrator to deal with things like setting up meetings, paying bills, writing minutes. And as such, we will the BIA intends to take a 50% person onto the staff through the auspices of the council. So that person will actually sit in one of the office spaces that the council has, but it will be paid for through the BIA budget. It's also worth noting that I gave guidance to the BIA that they should include funding for planters and flowers for the town this year. I think I recall at some point a discussion that we had that the county would take over that role. but I said in the interests of providing a conservative budget to include what must be around about $14,000 to cover those costs. If those costs were not there, that budget would come into balance. I just wanted to offer that as background to this budget, which I fully support.
Thank you for that clarification. Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Moving on to 7.1.6, which is RPT-22-86, which is the 2022 debenture issue application. Heather, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this. It's pretty straightforward, or just answer questions. It's up to you.
I am available to answer any questions that might be on the report.
Okay. Committee, any questions for Heather? Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Heather. I did ask Heather a few questions today earlier, so I appreciate Heather answering them. One of them was the gravel, the hard top, the projects that went on and when they went on. And some of them weren't dated back to, the earliest ones dated back to 2017. Now we're debenturing them. How have we carried those debts thus far? I guess we're just paying interest on that till now. I don't even know how. I guess I'll leave it at that. How have we been carrying that debt for the last, say, 4 years or 5 years?
Through the chair to Councillor Miller. The project was originally approved over the course of, I believe it was 2 years. The original 1 million was 2017 approved, and the second million was approved in 2018. So to this point, they have been funded through the current cash flows that the county has. And the reason that it hasn't been issued yet was it had to wait to the point of reaching the 2 million. So the 2 million was actually reached in the end of 2019's construction year. So that is where we're at with that project and why it was spanned over 4 years.
Okay, so just basically we've been carrying on their current levy, I guess, as
Yeah.
time goes on. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on the report? Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The fire communications item that's on the list there, can you tell us what that is? Like, I know originally we were trying to get new radio systems, and then I think we put up some towers to improve signals. And what does that amount include, Heather, please?
Through the chair to Councillor Gatward, I am going to pass this question over to Michael Bradley if he's able to answer it.
Mr. Bradley.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair. I think I can answer the question. I don't have all the specifics, but this was the, you'll recall back in, I think, 2018, late in the budget process, we kind of rushed on a recommendation to acquire a new fire communication system. So this would be the entire system. This would be new radios. This would be the communication software platform system that fire services gets dispatched from. I believe it included new communications consoles for the dispatcher. It was a full, basically, rebuild of the system. And I think the reason for that is that the old system wasn't supported anymore, and it started to fail. So this moved the fire service from, as I recall, an analog-based system to a digital-based system, and it had pager. It had greater pager operability and things like that. So that's my kind of high-level recollection of the project itself. We can certainly get more information if council required on the full scope of the project, but that's I think at a high level what the project was. Thank you.
So thank you for that. So that money wasn't included in the original taxpayer funded budget then. It was just put on hold until we paid all the bills and then we decided now that we're going to cover the cost with a debenture. Is that how it works?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Sure, no. So as I recall it, late in the 2018 budget, we'd started, the fire chief of the time had said, you know, our communication system is failing and we really need to get it replaced. So we kind of came in late in the budget process and requested council approve a capital item, but we proposed to fund it with long-term debt so that it wouldn't increase the tax levy at that time. So it was approved as a long-term debt funded item.
Okay, I think that just twigged my memory. I think, yeah, originally they'd asked for 700,000 or 750,000. So thank you very much.
Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed?
Excuse me, Councillor Pierce, we need a mover and a seconder for that, please.
I thought we had, oh, my apologies. Sorry, I thought I had that. Mover to get it on the floor. Councillor Coleman, Councillor Wheat. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thanks for keeping me on my toes, Nancy. Appreciate that. Okay, so that is all for the items to be approved. We're going to move on to 7.2, which is consent items to be received. I do see 4 of them there. If somebody's willing to offer them all up, or unless somebody wants any of them pulled. Councillor Coleman, to receive all 4. Seconder for that, Councillor Howes. Anybody have any questions on any of them? Councillor Gatward?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's not a question, but the Canesville and the second one, Mount Pleasant water systems, both had excellent reports. So I'd like to thank the water staff for doing such a great job and getting 100% on both of them. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on any of them? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? They are approved to receive. Okay, committee reports, section 8. 8.1 is a Brand Heritage Committee report from March 3rd. So again, this is one of the reports. We're going to move forward to 9.4. So first of all, can I get somebody to get it on the floor as a mover? Councillor McAlpine, seconder, Councillor Bell. Any questions on this report? Councillor Bell.
Not so much a question, but a comment. Item 1, it says that Councillor McAlpine be appointed chair, and yet in the minutes it says Councillor Howes was appointed chair. So I'm not quite sure what the reality of the story is, but somebody can eliminate the confusion, please.
Councillor Howes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Councillor Bell. A nomination was made for Councillor McAlpine to continue as chair of the Heritage Advisory Committee, and he declined. And then a second nomination was done to nominate me as chair for the Heritage Advisory Committee, and I accepted.
So we need to amend item number 1 then.
Okay, duly noted. Any other questions or comments on the report? Okay, so we've got a mover in a second. Oh, Councillor Wheat, question?
Not a question, Mr. Chair, but reading the minutes, I'm a little bit concerned when I see the resignation of 4 individuals that I had spent time with when I was on the Heritage Committee. I felt that Ruth Leffler in particular, not to center anyone out, was a tremendous contributor to Heritage. And along with Steve Pinkett, who when you went to evaluate a building that you were looking at giving a heritage designation to, Steve Pinkett was a very valuable member, and I'm a little bit concerned about the retirement, particularly of those 2 individuals. I know Steve Schmidt and Lana Joe very well. They were long-term contributors, and perhaps they just felt it was time to move on. Maybe Ruth and Steve did too, but I like to note that they were both very, very valuable members of that committee, particularly Steve when you wanted to assess a potential building.
Thank you for that. Any other questions on the report? So we've got Councillor Gatward. You're on mute, Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I note the score sheet on the last page. Out of a possible 100 points, what does a building have to achieve to be worthy of a heritage designation? Or I think it was mentioned earlier by a delegation that it was going to be designated. Must understood, but
Councillor McAlpine, can you help us with that?
Yeah, so to get a designation, you need 50 points. So it's way above the necessary amount to be designated. So when the designation process, that's a prerogative of the council. And what you'd have to look at though, is you can actually designate certain parts. So for instance, if we want to renovate the inside and to up to today's standards, we wouldn't necessarily have to designate that part. We could just designate the outside exterior of the building. And surprisingly enough, with this particular building, it has a very unique architecture. And so a lot of the previous Tudor styling is still there and exists, along with original windows, some original doors. And for a 90-year-old building, that's hard to believe. So a lot of the points in this case are due to the historical history of the location and also its development in the community. So there's a lot of factors that go into
Councillor
it.
McAlpine, Councillor McAlpine, I'm sorry, I'm gonna kind of cut you off there because the question that was asked is how many points are required.
Okay.
You're getting into something a little more in depth here. Councillor Gatward, that answers your question.
Yeah, I'm finished anyway.
Okay, thank you for that. Sorry to cut you off there, Councillor McAlpine. It's just the question that was asked was how many points.
Okay, no problem.
Okay. Any other questions on this report? Okay, so making the amendment to Councillor McAlpine declining the offer to stand as chair, and we've got a mover and a seconder to forward this one on to 9.4 as well. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to section 9, staff reports. We've got 9.1, which is RPT-22-67, which is property standards bylaw amendments. Mr. Bergeron, I'm not sure if you want to speak to this, but let's get it on the floor first. Who is the mover? Mayor Bailey? Councillor Coleman? Greg, I'm not sure if you want to speak to the report or?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I believe the report is self-explanatory. We had a little bit of background here. We went through some zoning bylaw amendments in February, and we saw that opportunity to make some amendments to the property standards bylaw and some updates as well, just to ensure that there's cohesive language with the zoning bylaw as it relates to shipping containers. And I'm certainly happy to answer any questions that the committee would have.
Okay. Any questions from committee on this report? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. We will move on to 9.2, which is RPT-22-80, the possible modifications to Mile Hill Road. Rick, I'm not sure if you're on, if you want to speak to the report or somebody wants to speak to it, Mr. Walton, or just ask questions.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Again, I think this report is fairly self-explanatory. The only decision council's making tonight is for staff to actually do public consultation and consider this and bring back a future report depending on what the outcome of that public consultation is. And the only other point I'll make is that this was request brought through Brant Steve Streets and the evaluation of that by staff.
Okay, thank you for that. Mover to get it on the floor. Councillor Bell. Counselor Howes. Questions on the report? No questions? Okay, all those in favor of the recommendation? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, moving on to 9.3, which is RPT 22-56, the administration facilities of post-COVID workplaces. Adam's report here. Can I get a mover to get it on the floor? Mayor Bailey, seconded. Nobody seconded, folks? Councillor Chambers. Adam, do you wish to speak to your report?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, I have no further comments on this. Be able to answer any questions.
Okay, questions for Adam on his report, committee? Councillor Gatward, and then Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm seeing, Adam, that you want to close the Community Services Administration building and demolish it. And I was on council as I believe Councillor Chambers was when we purchased this building, and it was renovated probably in 2010. I don't know exactly when, but the back portion of the building, we spent a fair amount of money in there. And I do know a lot of, according to the report, a lot of the community services staff are working elsewhere. And I'm wondering if this building was considered, since we own it, for the use of the property management. 3 staff people that used to work in Oakland. It certainly would be big enough. And I don't know where all the community services staff are going. Adam, is there a master plan of what the employees, where they're working and who's doing what in what location? Because I'm not comfortable approving the demolition of that building until I know more about what the grand scheme of things is, so to speak. So maybe you'd like to speak to that, Adam. Thank you.
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Gatward. As I understand, there are, I think as outlined in the report, there are certain staff that will have sort of permanent installations. And then the rest of the staff will either be working from home all the time, most of the time, or using a hotel desk in a county facility. So we don't, that's sort of the premise of the whole hoteling idea, is that you don't know exactly where someone will be working. They'll be able to work in Burford or they'll be able to work in Paris, so long as there's an available desk there. So I understand that there is permanent, the ones that will be permanent installations, you know, we could provide that information as to where people are going to be permanently, but the hoteling option provides that flexibility to people. I am not I don't have specific knowledge of the property management piece. You'd have to ask Mr. Walter and Mr. Bradley about that specifically, but obviously, you know, I think they're out and about dealing with contractors on site, dealing with issues. So this is probably a perfect solution. The hotel solution is a perfect one for them to just grab a desk wherever one is available. I think the sort of shift to digital technology has made it a lot easier. You don't need large reams of files at your personal fingertips. So beyond that, I think that's pretty much all I can offer about that.
Councillor Gatward.
Well, thank you for that, Adam. And I do know that when they worked from the Oakland office, when a building project is going on, they have reams of plans that they rolled out on the big table, and they just can't do that on an ordinary desk. So they do need a home. And there was a big, nice conference table, I recall, in that Curtis Ave building, where they could easily roll out all their plans and whatever. It just seems to me like such a shame to tear it down when we fixed it all up and spent, a few $100,000 on it. So those are my comments. And I do understand the hoteling concept that you've explained, and that's probably going to save money. I guess while I still have the floor, is there going to be any employees left at Wincy Mills? Are we still going to be leasing there? Does anybody know?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, yeah. The intent, I believe, is to continue with the lease at Wincy Mills. It's a great space for a county perspective in terms of a central location. Sort of, while it's two different spaces, it's interconnected to, in a lot of ways, the downtown Paris office provides a lot of flexibility in that way. While it's an older building, it's a much more bright, modern, open building and office space. And I think, just to comment a little bit more about Curtis Ave in my report, I think the intent when that property was purchased, as an office, it was converted from, I believe, an open garage. So, it's a building that wasn't designed to be a modern office environment, especially with some air quality issues. It would require significant HVAC improvements. I think a lot of continued needed capital maintenance. I don't believe anything's really been done in that 10 years. So, I think it's an opportunity to ensure that we don't spend any more capital on this building than what we already have put into it. I recognize we have put money into it, but at the end of the day, it provides the balance where we have a building that requires a significant amount of capital in the future and really doesn't fit with the future post-COVID workplace model that we proposed here. So
it was a Sears catalog outlet.
Yeah, and county staff worked in it. Yeah.
When we purchased it, and so thank you for your information, Adam. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councillor Miller and then Councillor Bell.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I think we've been using it for 10 years because Kelly Reichel was GM of Community Services at the time. But I was wondering, I didn't think it was that bad. I thought it was working kind of good. I didn't see in your report. My question is, any consideration given to renting it for the time being until such time as maybe we need that land in the future, using it as a revenue source?
I'm going to pass that over to Mr. Bradley.
Michael.
Thank you, through you, Mr. So yeah, confirming, we bought the property in 2012, and we had at the time, I was part of the discussions about a vision that it would serve for about 8 years, and that was the level of investment that we put into it. So it's certainly tired. Our preference is to surplus the building and knock it down. We think it's an impediment to the function of the health hub, which is right behind it. We believe if the health hub is successful, we're going to need additional parking. And we won't really know that until the COVID era completely winds down and the health hub really fully moves to its full operating model. Maybe just a few more thoughts. I worked out of the building for a couple of years. It's a hard building to work out of. It's not an attractive building to use when you're trying to attract and recruit staff. It's cold, it's drafty, it's uninsulated. And it has a floor plan that makes it very difficult to put people in. So we can functionally hold about 11 people in that building. We can hold 22 here at the suite in Wincy Mills. So for the cost of what we would need to carry that building versus the cost what we pay in leasing here, we can double the amount of staff that we can accommodate. So I think it's a fairly simple decision, but I appreciate that it is a bit of there's some sunk cost in it, but we believe that it's fulfilled its use and that it's the best path for it. I think maybe just reminding council, a big part of the reason we bought the property was because of the land, because it was a key component to that land holding that we owned in that area. We've been using that land holding very effectively for fire and men and for the health hub, and we think it's time that we surplus the building. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you for the answer. Okay, so I mean, there is plans, I guess, for that area down in the not too distant future, and I wasn't aware of that. So, but I thought you would have been used to working in cold and drafty all this time. So,
Okay, thank you, Councilor Miller. Councilor Bell.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Adam. Adam, thank you for the report. I think this is well prepared. It tells a great story. I think it's a silver lining on the COVID cloud, but it coincides nicely with technology that we're all getting more comfortable with, and it just is an adjunct to the conversation we had last week about how we conduct council meetings. So I'm very supportive of it. I think we're catching up with private industry. This is where private industry was probably 10 years ago. It does provide flexibility in all kinds of different ways. And to Michael's point about the facility that is there today, the Community Services Admin Building, if any of you have been to Lang's Healthcare Centre in Cambridge, they built a 58,000 square foot building, and almost the minute it was finished, they knew they had to expand. And I think by removing this community services building, we have that facility readily available to us, and I fully expect it to be used. So I'm fully supportive. Thank you, Adam.
Thank you for that. Any more questions on this report? Okay, all those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Okay, we're going to move on to 9.4 committee, but just a reminder, to 9.4, we've added the delegation from Nancy, which was 4.2. We've added the petition list, which was 4.3. We're also adding the letter from the St. George BIA, which is 10.1. And we're also adding the committee report of 8.1, all wrapped up in a nice little bow to the staff report of 9.4. Everybody understand that? Excellent. So as far as 9.4, which is RPT-22-57, can I get a mover to get it on the floor, please? Councillor Wheat and Councillor Coleman. I'm not sure if we have any questions on this report. So we will go Councillor Wheat, then Councillor McAlpine.
I'll move option 1, seeking a seconder.
So we have a mover for option 1 with Wheat, a seconder with Mayor Bailey. So at this point in time, to option 1, questions. Councillor Bell, then Councillor Howes.
A point of order, Mr. Chair. I noticed in the minutes of the Brant Heritage Committee meeting that the mayor recused himself from the discussion. So is it appropriate for him to be the second on this motion?
Mr. Mayor?
Yeah, I spent the afternoon today with the Integrity Commissioner, and she told me that I have done my due diligence by taking myself away from any discussion. And when we purchased the property, I wasn't there either. As a neighbor and as the mayor to this property, after the options are before us with nothing but approval, and she said that I have every right to vote tonight and to participate. She said the only person that can't vote tonight would be anyone who put their name on a public petition and forwarded it to council. So she said, as long as your name is not on a petition presented to council tonight, or any councillor's name is on any petition presented tonight to this council for this decision, they can't vote. So that's not me. That would be Councillor McAlpine. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Howes? And then Councillor Chambers.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Are you allowing comments at this point or just questions?
Either or, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. So obviously this is a tricky subject.
Sorry to interrupt you there, Councillor, but to the motion of option 1, correct?
Right.
Okay.
So this is a tricky subject, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, as I'm sure everybody has. And I respect the idea of paying tribute to the history of this building. However, the costs associated with renovating it to today's municipal standards including accessibility, I believe are too much of a burden to the taxpayer. I would like to see us include a heritage storyboard at this site, and I love the idea of vintage style electrical charging stations. But the bottom line, in my opinion, when we voted to purchase this property, it was with the vision of it being primarily for parking and some green space and not as a heritage landmark. So I do fully support the staff recommendation.
Okay. Councillor Chambers.
Just to unwrap some confusion that I have, the recommendation was moved and seconded, and then Councillor Wheat moved option 1. Well, option 1 is part of the original recommendation, so I'm just confused as to where we are with what's on the table and what we're speaking to, because I think there's 2 motions on the floor, and I'm confused. So maybe you can clarify what status the recommendation and the motions are.
Certainly. So my getting a mover and a seconder to get it on the floor was to discuss the package that we moved to 9.4, which is the overall recommendation of which option we're going to choose here. And then Councillor Wheat put a motion up to choose option 1 for 9.4. So I guess I may have confused things with the original mover and a seconder to get the whole package on the table.
Just to clarify, is the recommendation that's printed on the agenda as a recommendation with several whereas clauses and an operative clause, therefore council approve option 1, is that what is on the table, or is just we approve option 1 on the table? I think I understood it to be the recommendation with all the recital clauses and the operative clauses were moved and seconded originally.
That you're correct on that, Councillor Chambers. It was my mistake here. The recommendation within the recommendation from staff is option 1.
So the Councillor Wheat's motion would not be in order then, because it's moot. It's already in the recommendation.
That is correct. My apologies on that, committee. Councillor Wheat.
My apologies to Councillor Chambers for confusing you, sir. I just wanted to make sure that option 1 was in there. I know it's in the original recommendation, which I approved, but I just wanted to confirm that option 1, make sure that it was in that original recommendation. And I apologize for confusing you, sir.
No, I apology, not necessary, Councillor Wheat. I think that was, as I say, it was my mistake in trying to get a mover and a seconder to bring the whole package, because we added quite a few things to 9.4 here. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear. But
no, it wasn't your mistake, Mr. Chair. It was my mistake for getting a little bit over anxious.
Okay, so we're all good on where we're at right now. As part of the recommendation by staff is option 1, which has been moved and seconded. Councillor Chambers.
And the second clarification, and I believe Councillor McAlpine wanted to interject. I'm not sure whether he was going to declare a conflict of interest, but if he wants to, he should do it now. If he doesn't have to. But since the discussion is occurring and he hasn't declared a conflict of interest, that is up to him.
Correct.
I don't know, can I get a clarification about that? I wasn't aware that signing a petition would remove me from my ability to vote on this. And
we have
it seems that I'm promoting.
Jyoti isn't with us this evening. Can anybody clarify that? Councillor Chambers?
Can't clarify whether it is or it isn't, but this is just a committee recommendation to council. And if Councillor McAlpine can have it clarified, there's nothing that would stop him, if he's not in the conflict, from addressing the recommendation in council. And that may help him out if he's uncertain whether he should be declaring it at this level or not.
Mhm. But I can still ask questions and
If you declare a conflict of interest, you are not allowed or should not be allowed and should not want to take part in the discussion or the vote. That's what when you declare a conflict, you are declaring a conflict of interest, and you should not try to influence by discussion the question that is before us.
Thank you.
Hmm.
Okay. So, Councillor McAlpine, are you going to declare a conflict of interest at this point in this meeting?
unfortunately, I guess I have to. I feel that I'm only trying to represent my constituents and their concerns, and I feel that option one isn't representing my constituents.
Okay.
But
so,
what
Councillor
can I say?
McAlpine, if you're declaring a conflict, I've got to stop you there. So you are declaring a conflict of interest. Okay, thank you. Councillor Bell, you had your hand up.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To Adam, a couple of questions, if I may, regarding the recommendation. You point out that it is the cheaper of the options 1 and 2. Does that take account of the fact that we would have washrooms in option 2, but not in option 1? Just bearing in mind, we spent $250,000 to put washrooms in Paris. It rather narrows the gap in commercial terms. Could you comment on that?
Certainly, through you, Mr. Chair. I would assume that obviously any washrooms would be included in that financial feasibility of option 2. But that said, I'm not entirely sure the economics of the difference of putting them at the Waterworks building or putting them in the super test station.
Sorry, if I may make a comment, Mr. Chair, that if you're comparing 2 options here, I mean, we really need to recognise. I've never seen that proposal for putting public washrooms at the Waterworks. So this is, doesn't exist as far as this particular conversation
Fair enough,
goes.
yeah.
I think if you want to have public washrooms in St. George, then what is the cost that you would add to option 1 to give comparable scope?
In terms of, through you, Mr. Chair, in terms of at the current Waterworks building or in the actual, on the property of 2 Beverly Street?
It really doesn't matter where. It's just the fact that we got washrooms in one and not in the other.
Right.
Well, through you, Mr. Chair, I recognize that the ones in Paris came at a cost, but we haven't fully delved into that option in terms of how much it would be. I think it's just been discussed at a staff level, but I think Mr. Bradley can probably provide a little more context on that, because I haven't really been, no pun intended, privy to those discussions. So.
Good choice of words, Adam.
Well played.
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I mean, I think the notion of potentially putting water, it's been identified through this process. A lot of people have said, well, that we'd like to see washrooms in downtown St. George. I think at the staff level, we've thought, well, if we wanted to put washrooms in downtown St. George, a logical place to put them would be the existing water building, which is across the road from this site. I suspect that they would not need to be as large as the washrooms that we're building down here in Paris, because there isn't as much traffic. I mean, we have 300 or 400 parking spots here in Paris. We have maybe 100 for the spots in St. George. We've got probably 5 times more business in the downtown Paris here. So I think it could probably be a single washroom, and I would throw out probably a cost of $125,000 to do that. A lot of the cost here in Paris was about site works, because we did run into some complicated site works based on the old landscape here in Paris. So I think that'd be a reasonable number. I think to as a bit of a placeholder, what we could pay to have a public washroom put in downtown St. George, leaning up against another building, likely the Waterworks building.
Yeah, thank you. It just does make a difference to the economic analysis. So that's my first question. Second question, if we chose option 2 rather than option 1, is there a differential in the number of parking spaces that would be available?
Through you, Mr. Chair, obviously we would lose any potential parking spaces that are the footprint of the original portion of the super test building. So if you do about 10 feet per parking space times about 80 feet wide from the road, from the edge of the road to the western portion of the existing building or the original portion of the building, probably anywhere between 7 to 8 spaces. And depending on the site development, which is coming following the identification of the preferred vision by council, it could be maybe even more than that. So,
thank you. And final question: does option 1 provide a community facility as option 2 would?
Through you, Mr. Chair. No, it doesn't provide a physical community facility as option 2 would. But through a lot of the public comments, people recognize the need for a flexible community space, which outdoors, whether that's during Apple Fest, a lot of people requested that, we have a space for, say, a seasonal farmers market to promote the local agricultural community. And through those amenities that were identified through the public consultation, like, potential just simple water and electrical servicing to support those functions. That's something we would look to include in any design to ensure that we're doing that in conjunction with any redevelopment plan, as opposed to trying to piecemeal it in after the fact, which can become more difficult. So in a way, yes, it would have some measure of outdoor external community use while still retaining its use as a parking lot the majority of the time. But any partnerships or something we would explore, as the process develops.
Thank you. I'll just make the comment that in Paris, of course, we've had the discussion about the Lawn Bowling Club and the provision of a multi-purpose facility there, which would effectively replicate, maybe in a larger scale, what the Gardening Club of St. George is proposing for this facility. I'm just looking for equity between major centers of population. Thank you, Adam.
Mayor Bailey.
Yeah, that's through you, Mr. Chair. That's what I was going to suggest too. St. George population isn't Paris, and the makeup of the stores in St. George, you start with a tea house, you have a tattoo parlor, and then a restaurant with washrooms, and then an alley, then a restaurant with washrooms, and then an alley, and then a restaurant with washrooms, and then a community center and a community hall. It's not time for St. George to have washrooms, and if they were going to go somewhere, I don't believe they should be there. St. George, right now, the downtown is a hook, being that corner of Beverly and straight down Main Street to all the shops that end up at the mill. And when we have our master plan in St. George, I believe when our population warrants it, we will have public washrooms, and they'll be in a safer place than the busiest corner in town, because at public washrooms, all kinds of things can happen. You're very close to the traffic where they would be if the building were to stay up. There's an argument for all of those points. The public consultation did tell us what the people of St. George wanted. They want a green space. They want a pavilion of some sort. They want a place to put a big Christmas tree, so that instead of coming to Jingle Bell Night and just lighting the tree in Paris, we can light our own tree in St. George as the population grows. It was quite apparent what the people wanted in St. George. So I'm just saying, if we take the examples that people gave us, it's absolutely a place to start without the building. Give them everything they want, and then move on with a master plan in a couple of years when the population warrants it. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Councillor Wheat, and then Councillor Gatler.
Speaking about public washrooms, we're getting one in Paris right now. In fact, it's under construction as we speak. But the downtown portion of Paris has far more commercial traffic than this downtown St. George. St. George is basically 3 downtown restaurants and 2 or 3 smaller commercial development, whereas Paris has, I'm just ballparking, at least a dozen commercial outlets, clothing stores, shoe stores, banks. There's just a lot more downtown traffic in Paris by the residents than there is in St. George. It's not even close. And I'm a St. George person. but St. George does not compare to the traffic that Paris has.
Councillor Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, earlier, Nancy was her name?
Yep, the delegation.
Yeah, the delegation made an excellent presentation. There was lots of great ideas to use on that site. And I think a lot of those ideas could be incorporated into that space without the building. I think a tourism kiosk, a gazebo with benches, and the garden club could do their thing to make it look lovely. And that wouldn't take away all those extra parking spaces. When you read the comments and the consultation comments in Engage Brant, the people wanted more parking. And that's what we bought that for. So I saw the photos that were included with the package, and the building is in very bad shape inside. I know it could be repaired, but I don't think that's the best option. So I do support the staff report. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Miller, Councillor Chambers, Councillor Coleman, you haven't had a chance to speak. Anything you'd like to add? Councillor Miller.
I'll just say, when I think of historical buildings, I do think of the Paris Old Town Hall. I do look at this building. It's a unique architecture. I appreciate that. But looking at the pictures, I have a hard time really wanting to spend money to save that building, which isn't even 100 years old. I mean, I have a house that's older than that, so that's where I fall on. I would want to, but I want to bring forward the fact that I'm having a hard time understanding what the people want. I know we had Engage Brant, but I've also heard that a lot of people aren't engaging Brant when we have that because it's electronic, and we heard that tonight. So, and we seen the petition. There was a lot of signatures on it. We had presentations obviously tonight. So, when I hear the people of St. George want it taken down, or the people of St. George want it kept up, I don't know what to believe. So I'll leave it at that.
Final one, Mayor Bailey, final one.
Yeah, just through you, Mr. Chair, to Councillor Miller, there was, I think 84 people signed another petition tonight that was generated with 84 that said take it down. So there was, I think, 80 something to leave it up. There was 80 something to take it down. Plus what Councillor McAlpine wanted was for us to put it out for public consultation, which we did, which we heard. And then all these other things started happening, late at night and in funny places. And this is what's brought us here tonight to this vote. So I think we did what we were asked to do, and the results are clear. And
Councillor Chambers, I know I said last one to the mayor, but you got the last say here.
Sorry, I didn't mean to preempt anybody. I just wanted to make a comment. Years ago, in the town of Burford, a service station was torn down and made into a parking lot. And the parking lot is well used today. It's between Nectals and the hardware store. And if you took it away, people would be pretty upset. But the comment that I wanted to make is the recommendation says, remove existing buildings, expand existing parking lot, and the keywords are beautify area as preferred option. So the finishing touch will be the beautification of the area, because it is a focal point of the community. Mm-hmm. Whatever is done on there, it should be done in a tasteful manner that is a credit to the intersection, rather than just a bunch of pavement and curbstone. Mm-hmm. So that's my only comment, and that's what was lacking in the Burford experience. And had there been some park benches and some green space along with the parking lot, I think people would have liked it even more than what they liked it now. But maybe history is repeating itself.
Okay, good discussion, folks. We do have a seconder, or a mover and a seconder for the staff recommendation. It is on the table. I am going to call the vote. All those in favor of the staff recommendation? Opposed? That is carried, and that will go forward to council.
Thank you.
Okay. Communications, we moved 10.1 into that, so there's no further communications. Other business, Councillor Gatward, you had something for other
Councillor
business.
Pierce.
Oh, hello.
Hi, Councillor Pierce. Can I just get a motion for someone to receive as information item 4.2, 4.3, 10.1, and that the Brant Heritage Committee report as amended be approved?
Sure, I thought we did that, but absolutely. Councillor Coleman, seconder. Councillor Wheat. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Okay. Councillor Gatward, other business? You're on mute.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just had a question regarding tenders. I was very pleased tonight to see the vehicles coming forward, and I wondered, when will the tenders be coming forward for approval for our road projects?
Mr. Walton, are you on? You answer that?
Through your chair, Pierce, to Councillor Gatward. I believe you'll start to see some tenders come forward in the April cycle. April and May will be the heavy cycle for that, for sure. I'm not sure the dates of closing, but there are some which are just ready to go out. I know that.
Councillor Gatward?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you for that. Okay, there was no other business. So can I get a motion to move into camera, please? Mayor Bailey, Councillor Bell, all in favor? Opposed? Let's take a trip. Looks as though everybody is back. Okay. There's no other business on the agenda for this evening. Does anybody else have anything for the betterment of the county? Seeing none, I thank you for your time. Have a great evening. And the next meeting of this is April 19th. Have a great night, folks.
Thanks, John.
Good night.
Good night, all.